It's late at night, and the darkness seems to swallow the road in front of you. As your car cruises through the thick woods of Kentucky, the headlights barely cut through the fog, casting eerie shadows that dance on the trees. The night air feels unnaturally cold, even with the windows rolled up. You press your foot a little harder on the gas, trying to escape the unsettling feeling creeping up your spine. The trees, old and gnarled, seem to close in around you, their branches twisting like skeletal hands trying to reach for you, their leaves whispering in the wind. You could swear you hear something. Voices, low murmurs carried by the wind, like secrets long forgotten, begging to be uncovered. These woods aren't just any ordinary forest. They have a reputation, a dark one, that locals speak of only in hushed tones. It's not the kind of place people visit out of curiosity or pleasure. In fact, most of the town's residents will advise you to stay away, warning you that the woods are cursed. In these parts of Kentucky, it's an unspoken rule that you don't wander too far into the trees after nightfall. For those who have ignored the warnings, the woods have proven themselves to be unforgiving. Travelers and hunters who dared venture too deep never returned. Some, they say, were found, disfigured, mutilated, their faces unrecognizable, their bodies marred with strange markings and bruises. Others were never seen again, leaving behind nothing but the scent of decay and the unmistakable feeling that something was very, very wrong. You've heard the stories. Everyone in the area has. It's not just the occasional missing person. It's the way people disappear, how they vanish without a trace, swallowed whole by the forest, leaving only the faintest traces of their existence behind. A shoe, a broken branch, a scrap of clothing. The deeper you go into the woods, the more dangerous it becomes. The locals call it the Devil's Hollow, a place where even the bravest men falter. There are whispers about what really happens to those who wander too far. Some say the woods are alive, that they want something from you. The older folks around town talk about how the trees have always been there, ancient and unfathomable, and that long before the town was founded, they held secrets that shouldn't be disturbed. There's one story, more terrifying than the rest, that gets passed down every generation. It's about the skin taker, a creature who haunts the darkest corners of these woods, a legend whispered among those who know the true history of Kentucky's cursed forests. Who or what is the skin taker? The question lingers in your mind as you drive, the road winding further into the heart of the woods. You've heard the stories, but they never seemed real. Until now. You've heard about the man, no, the monster, lurking in the shadows, hiding beneath the veil of darkness, preying on those who dare to travel these roads after the sun sets. The skin taker isn't just a man, they say. He's a ghost, a beast, a twisted amalgamation of all things terrifying, stitched together by the very essence of death itself. The locals speak of him in fearful reverence. They say he's been haunting Kentucky for generations, long before anyone can remember. He doesn't just kill. He doesn't simply vanish people into the night. He takes something from them. Their skin, their very essence. It's said that the skin taker wears the skins of his victims, wrapping himself in their flesh as if it were his own, until he becomes something unrecognizable, something that blends with the night itself. His appearance is a nightmare, something straight out of the deepest recesses of the human mind. A creature born from darkness, its skin stitched together from the remnants of those it has stolen. What drives him? Why does he take the skins of his victims, wearing them as trophies, as if they were pieces of clothing? The stories are unclear. Some say he's a man cursed. Others say he's a demon, an entity whose thirst for flesh can never be satisfied. He's no ordinary killer. He's an unholy force, an immortal creature who cannot be reasoned with, cannot be defeated. He doesn't just hunt for sport. He hunts for purpose. He's always watching, always waiting. When he strikes from the shadows, blending in with the forest itself, making it nearly impossible to know where the danger is coming from. No one really knows how many people he's claimed over the years, but the body count is high. More than one person has disappeared without a trace after stepping into the woods, and some of them, they say, came back. But they weren't the same. They were changed, twisted, disfigured in ways that couldn't be explained, their bodies altered and scarred beyond recognition, and their minds, those who survived the skin taker's touch, came back broken, their sanity shattered like glass, haunted by memories they couldn't fully comprehend. Some survivors have told tales of seeing the skin taker's face, if you can even call it a face. It's said to be a grotesque mask, a patchwork of different human features, sewn together with dark, twisted thread. Eyes that don't quite match, skin that looks both human and alien at the same time, all wrapped up in a cloak of darkness. They say if you stare into his eyes for too long, you can feel him digging into your soul, pulling something from you, something that can never be returned. What is it that drives people to venture into these woods, knowing the dangers that await them? Maybe it's the thrill of the unknown. Maybe it's the temptation of proving the legends wrong. Maybe it's the hope that just this once, the stories won't be true. But deep down, you know that's not the case. You know better. The skin taker isn't just a myth. He's real. And he's waiting for anyone foolish enough to enter his domain. As your car continues through the fog, the air feels heavier now, like the woods themselves are pressing in on you, closing the world down to just you and the road. Every turn feels like it could be your last. And as you pass another bend, you think you hear something. A faint whisper, like the wind speaking through the trees. A voice, low and hushed, as if it's calling to you, beckoning you deeper into the forest. You grip the steering wheel tighter, but the sound grows louder, clearer. And that's when you realize it's not the wind. It's the skin taker. He's out there, watching, waiting. The whispers are getting closer now. The first known victim of the skin taker was a young hunter named Caleb, a man from a small, quiet town nestled in the heart of Kentucky. It was the 1800s, a time when the woods were still wild, and people didn't venture too far into the forests unless they had to. Caleb, like many of the locals, had heard the legends, the whispered stories passed down from generation to generation about the skin taker, a creature born of darkness and hunger, lurking in the woods. But Caleb was a man of logic, a hunter by trade, and he dismissed the tales as nothing more than superstitions. He knew the woods. He had spent his life tracking game, learning the rhythms of the land, and nothing had ever seemed out of the ordinary. The old folks could tell their tales all they wanted, but Caleb had no time for ghost stories. That all changed one fateful evening when Caleb set out on a hunting trip. It was an unusually cold night for early autumn. But that didn't bother him. He was used to the chill. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb made his way deeper into the woods. The familiar crunch of leaves beneath his boots, the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the forest. He had been tracking a large buck for hours, and tonight he could feel it. He was close. He was sure the animal was nearby, just waiting to be found. The thrill of the hunt was all that mattered. But as the shadows lengthened and the forest grew darker, Caleb noticed something odd. He had been moving in a straight line, yet something about the trees around him seemed off. There was an unnatural stillness to the night. The usual sounds of the forest, the calls of night birds, the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush were completely absent. Only the whisper of the wind through the leaves remained. It was unsettling, but Caleb pressed on, determined to find his prize. That's when he saw it. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but as he drew closer, he realized it was real. There, nailed to the trunks of two trees, were pieces of skin. Human skin, stretched out like a grotesque tapestry. The pale, discolored patches were roughly sewn together with crude stitching, as if someone or something had done it by hand. Caleb's stomach turned as he stepped closer to get a better look, his heart pounding in his chest. The skin was fresh, still wet with blood. He could almost hear the soft thrum of the forest around him, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. He swallowed hard, a knot forming in his throat. This wasn't the work of any animal. No, this was something much worse. This was a message. Then, as if on cue, Caleb heard it. the soft rustling in the trees. The sound was faint at first, like a whisper carried by the wind, but it quickly grew louder. He froze, his blood turning cold. The air seemed to shift, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Caleb's hand instinctively reached for his rifle, the weight of it comforting in his grip. But it didn't feel like enough. There was something in those woods, something far more dangerous than any animal. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness, searching for the source of the noise. Through the thick fog that had settled over the forest floor, he saw a figure. It was difficult to make out at first, but as it moved toward him, Caleb's blood ran cold. It wasn't a man, not completely. The figure was tall and twisted, its limbs unnaturally long, its movements slow and deliberate. It was cloaked in shadows, and Caleb couldn't make out its features, but he could feel its eyes on him, cold, lifeless eyes that pierced through the darkness. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. Caleb knew instinctively that it was something unnatural, something not of this world. Panic surged through him as the figure continued to move closer. The sound of its footsteps, almost inaudible over the rush of Caleb's heartbeat in his ears. He knew he had to run, but his legs felt like lead. Fear paralyzed him. It was too late. Without thinking, Caleb spun around, his heart pounding as he sprinted back the way he came. But no matter how fast he ran, the figure was faster. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, it was closer, its hollow eyes staring at him with an unsettling calm. Caleb pushed himself harder, his breath ragged in his chest as he tried to escape the nightmare that was gaining on him. He could feel the fog creeping in, thick and suffocating, like the woods themselves were closing in around him. But before he could make it more than a few yards, Caleb felt it. Cold hands, impossibly strong, gripping his legs. His body jerked backward as the hands dragged him to the ground. His rifle flew from his grasp, and the next thing Caleb knew, the world was swallowed by darkness. His scream was muffled by the weight of something cold and sharp pressing against his skin. And then, nothing. Next morning, the townspeople went looking for Caleb. They had heard nothing from him the night before, and his absence had raised suspicions. But when they reached the area where he had last been seen, all they found were his boots, his rifle, and a trail of blood leading deeper into the woods. Caleb was gone, and the only clue that remained was the horrifying sight of the human skin nailed to the trees, now stained with the marks of his struggle. The town was shaken to its core. The locals were too afraid to speak of what had really happened, but they knew. They all knew. The skin taker had struck again. Rumors spread like wildfire through Kentucky, faster than any man or beast could run. Stories of Caleb's disappearance and the horrors he had uncovered in those woods were whispered in every corner of town. People spoke of the skin taker in hushed tones, fearful that even mentioning his name would invoke his wrath. The old-timers, who had once dismissed the legend as mere superstition, were now the first to warn travelers, stay out of the woods. No one who ventured too deep ever came back, and if they did, they were never quite the same. The tale of Caleb's gruesome fate was passed down through the generations, each telling more twisted and distorted than the last. But it all started with Caleb, the first known victim of the skin taker, the first to vanish into the depths of the forest, and the first to leave behind the chilling evidence that would haunt Kentucky for generations. And as the years passed, the stories only grew darker, as more victims were claimed by the skin taker, his legend spreading like wildfire, growing more terrifying with each passing year. But Caleb was the first, and his fate was just the beginning of something much worse. Years went by, and the legend of the skin taker continued to haunt the town like an ever-present shadow. With each passing decade, the stories became darker, more twisted, and more terrifying. What started as whispers around campfires evolved into full-blown tales, each one more horrifying than the last. Some people claimed to hear strange noises late at night, screams echoing through the dense trees, the kind of sound that seemed to send shivers down the spine, freezing people in their tracks. Others spoke of footsteps in the woods, echoing through the silence when no one was supposed to be out there. But perhaps the most chilling of all were the sightings. There were those who swore they saw a man, or something that looked like a man, lurking near the campfires in the dead of night. His skin was pale, too pale, almost as though it had been drained of life. His face, when visible, was like a mask, a grotesque imitation of humanity. The few who dared to look into his hollow eyes described a feeling of utter emptiness, as though they were staring into the very soul of death. Yet, when they tried to approach him, he vanished without a trace, leaving nothing behind but the cold, still air. Some claim to have seen him in the trees, moving swiftly and silently, blending into the darkness like a phantom. The skin taker, as they had come to call him, was no longer just a story. He was real, and he was hunting again. By the late 1900s, the skin taker had become more than just a name. He had become a force of nature, a creature so deeply embedded in the town's folklore that no one dared to question his existence anymore. The stories had spread far beyond the local community, carried by the fear of those who had encountered the creature, or had heard about those who didn't come back. Some of the older townspeople still remembered the terrifying night Caleb had disappeared, and how his story had become the beginning of something much worse. But it wasn't until a group of teenagers decided to test the legend that the true terror of the skin taker was unleashed once more. A group of teenagers, all eager to prove their bravery and dismiss the skin taker as nothing more than a tall tale, made a bold decision. They gathered their camping gear and set out to spend the night near the very same spot where Caleb had vanished all those years ago. armed with nothing but a flashlight, a camera, and their skepticism, they camped out under the shadow of the looming trees, ready to challenge the myth they thought was just a product of overactive imaginations. For a while, it seemed like just another camping trip. The night was clear, the sky filled with stars, and the sounds of the forest seemed almost peaceful. The group laughed and joked around the campfire, talking about how silly it was that anyone would believe such an absurd story. They talked about the skin taker as though he were some kind of cartoon villain, a ridiculous figment of local superstition. But as the hours passed and the fire slowly dimmed, a subtle shift in the atmosphere began to unsettle them. The wind had picked up, making the trees creak and sway, and the temperature dropped abruptly, turning the warm summer night into something cold and unnerving. Then they heard it. At first it was faint, just a soft rustling in the trees. But as the wind howled louder, the sound grew more distinct. It was as if something or someone was moving through the woods, brushing against the leaves and branches with deliberate steps. The teenagers stopped talking, their eyes darting nervously around the dark expanse. The sounds seemed to circle the camp, coming from all directions, as though they were surrounded. But no one dared to move. They sat frozen, listening intently, hearts racing in their chests. Every so often, a twig would snap, or a leaf would crunch, followed by a silence that felt even more oppressive than the noises. And then there was a scream. It wasn't the kind of scream one might expect. It wasn't filled with panic or terror. It was cold, distant, and it came from deeper in the woods. The teenagers froze, their blood running cold at the unmistakable sound of someone or something calling out for help. But as they looked at each other, unsure of what to do, the scream came again. It was louder this time, echoing through the trees with a twisted, unnatural pitch. One of the teens, a girl named Emily, jumped to her feet, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered frantically. Before anyone could respond, Emily bolted from the campfire and sprinted toward the source of the scream. Her friends yelled for her to stop, to wait, but she was already gone, disappearing into the darkness of the woods. The group stood there in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. They had come here to prove the skin taker was just a myth, but now, with Emily's disappearance, doubt began to creep into their minds. The wind howled louder, the trees shaking violently in a way that felt unnatural. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. They rushed to follow Emily, their flashlights flicking nervously over the ground, casting long, jittery shadows in the dense woods. The silence was deafening. There were no birds, no rustling animals, just the eerie sound of their footsteps and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. They called out for her, but the woods swallowed their voices. leaving only the unrelenting cold and the distant whisper of wind. It wasn't long before they found her, but what they saw, what they discovered, was something none of them would ever forget. Emily was gone. There was no sign of her, no trail of footprints, no broken branches to mark where she had gone. But there was something else. A bloodied trail. The ground was smeared with a dark, sticky substance that led deeper into the woods. The group stood frozen, staring at the trail, unsure whether they should follow it or run back to safety. But they knew, deep down, that there was no turning back now. Emily had been taken. The skin taker had claimed her. They followed the trail, heartbeats pounding in their chests. Each step they took seemed to take them farther into the heart of the forest, farther from the safety of their campfire. The air grew heavier, colder, and the whispers in the trees seemed to grow louder, as if the very woods themselves were alive, watching them. As they ventured deeper into the darkness, the trail grew fainter, as if it had vanished into thin air. They reached a clearing where the moonlight illuminated the ground in an eerie silver glow. And there, in the center of the clearing, they found it. A pile of torn, blood-soaked clothing scattered across the forest floor. It was all that remained of Emily. There were no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened. She had simply vanished, taken by the skin taker, leaving behind nothing but the chilling remnants of her last moments. The group stumbled back, their minds spinning with fear and confusion. They had come to test the legend, to prove it was all just a myth. But now, they were living the nightmare. They had seen the skin taker's work with their own eyes, and they knew, with a terrifying certainty, that the creature was real. The woods weren't just haunted by a legend. They were haunted by something far worse. Something that would never stop hunting. Something that was always watching, always waiting. And now, they were a part of it. As the years passed, the legend of the skin taker grew darker and more sinister. The whispers became louder, more frantic, and yet no one had ever been able to truly understand the creature that haunted the forests of Kentucky. More and more people disappeared, some vanishing without a trace, and others found in ways that turned even the toughest hearts to ice. The stories were never the same. Some victims were found with their skins peeled clean off, their bodies left to rot, dangling from the trees like grotesque trophies. The sight of these bodies was enough to turn even the most hardened of men away from the woods forever. But it wasn't just the sight of the mutilated bodies that chilled people to their core. It was the absolute lack of explanation. No one knew why the skin taker chose his victims. No one could fathom why he left their skin behind, why he took it, or where he went afterward. Some said the victims were unlucky. Others believed the skin taker was a force of nature, hunting for whatever he desired. And then there were the others, the ones like Emily, vanished, completely and utterly gone. No bodies, no clues. Just a sickening silence that hung over the town like a storm cloud. The families of these missing people held on to hope for as long as they could, but over time, even they had to face the truth. The skin taker was real, and there was no escaping him. Some locals started to leave, finding new homes in different towns, but others remained. The people who stayed were the ones who had learned to live in fear, constantly looking over their shoulders, never venturing too far into the woods. But there was one man who wasn't content to hide. Sheriff Nolan was a man of action. He had lived in the town his whole life, and the horror that had gripped it for so long had finally reached a breaking point for him. The skin taker's reign of terror had to end. He couldn't stand by and let the creature continue to rip families apart, to tear the heart out of his town. Sheriff Nolan was a seasoned man, a lawman who had dealt with everything from petty theft to violent crime, but this was different. This was beyond anything he had ever encountered. The sheriff had heard the stories, of course. He had heard about the bodies, the blood trails, the missing persons, but he had always dismissed it, just as Caleb had in the past. It was too fantastical, too unbelievable to be true. But now, the bodies couldn't be ignored any longer. The whispers from the woods couldn't be brushed off as superstition. Something was out there, something evil, and it was time to find out what it was. Sheriff Nolan spent days tracking the killer, following every lead, every piece of evidence, no matter how small. The locals were terrified to speak of the skin taker, but some still whispered of strange occurrences. The hairs on the back of their necks stood up at night, as if they could feel the presence of the creature in the trees. Others spoke of seeing the creature in the distance, standing in the shadows, watching. But no one had ever seen it close enough to describe it fully. Nolan was methodical. He didn't allow fear to cloud his judgment. He followed the bloody trails, the signs of struggle, the odd markings on the trees that seemed to match the grotesque stories. He mapped out the areas where the disappearances had occurred, finding patterns that seemed to lead him deeper into the forest than anyone had dared to go before. His pursuit of the skin taker took him into the very heart of the woods, where the trees grew so thick that sunlight never reached the forest floor. He could feel the air growing colder with every step, the silence around him deafening. But it wasn't the silence that made his skin crawl. It was the feeling that he was being watched, that something unseen was lurking just beyond his reach. It took days of painstaking tracking, but finally, Sheriff Nolan discovered something that made his blood run cold. Hidden deep in the forest, beneath the twisted roots of an ancient tree, he found something that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't just the remnants of a struggle, or another bloody trail leading into the darkness. No, this was something far worse. The sheriff discovered a cave, hidden in the thick brush, almost invisible To the untrained eye, the entrance was narrow, and it looked like it had been covered with moss and vines to conceal it. Nolan's heart raced as he stepped inside. The air in the cave was thick, heavy, with a dampness that clung to his skin. But it wasn't the humidity that made him shiver. It was the scent, the sickening, rancid odor that filled the cave, a mixture of decay, blood, and something worse. The further Nolan ventured into the cave, the stronger the stench became, choking him with its intensity. And then he saw it. What lay before him was beyond anything he could have imagined. The cave walls were lined with something that made him take an involuntary step back. Human skin. Hundreds, maybe thousands of pieces of skin, sewn together like a grotesque patchwork quilt. Some of it was old, yellowed and brittle, while other pieces were still fresh, as though they had been recently harvested. The skin was hung on the walls, draped over rocks, and even stuffed into cracks in the stone. It was clear that this was the skin taker's lair, the place where he took his victims and peeled them clean, keeping their skin as trophies. But that wasn't the most horrifying discovery. No, the true terror lay in the center of the cave. A figure, hunched over, with his back to Nolan, was working at the flesh he had so meticulously stripped from his victims. As Nolan stepped closer, the figure turned, and what he saw made his stomach churn. The skin taker was not a man at all. He was a creature, a twisted soul, something far beyond human. His body was a sickening patchwork of skin, stitched together with cruel, jagged seams. The skin was pale, lifeless, and stretched tight across his grotesque frame. His face, if it could even be called a face, was an abomination, a mask made from mismatched pieces of skin that barely resembled human features. His eyes were hollow, empty pits, and his mouth was a cruel slash that twisted unnaturally into a grin. It was clear now, this was no ordinary man. This was something far worse, something that had been feeding off the terror it caused for decades. The skin taker was a monster, a creature that had evolved over the years, its hunger for skin growing with every victim it claimed. But it wasn't just the skins that he sought. It was the fear, the terror that fueled him. The more fear he caused. Sheriff Nolan knew in that moment that the skin taker had no intention of stopping. His hunt for new skin was endless, his need to feed on fear insatiable. This was not just a man who killed for sport. This was a creature born from darkness, a twisted entity that could not be reasoned with, could not be defeated by normal means. And Sheriff Nolan, standing there in the cave, surrounded by the remains of so many victims, knew that he had made a terrible mistake by coming here. This wasn't a fight that could be won. The skin taker wasn't just hunting for skin. He was hunting for souls. And once you were in his sights, there was no escaping. Nolan had come to put an end to the creature's reign of terror, but instead, he found himself trapped in the same nightmare that had claimed so many others. The skin taker had revealed himself, and now Nolan understood just how deep the evil ran. The hunt was far from over. It had only just begun. The locals in the small, secluded town nestled deep within the Kentucky woods believe in many things, most of which are whispered over cracked mugs of coffee in dimly lit kitchens, or discussed in hushed tones during the long nights. But there is one belief that unites them all, one story that they all hold in common and that ties them together in fear. The skin taker is not just a man. He's something much worse. He is a curse, a force of nature, a creature born from the darkness of the woods, one that cannot be escaped. They say that once you hear his whisper carried on the wind, once you feel the chill of his presence, you are marked. It's not a question of if he will come for you, it's when. And when he comes, there is no escape. No one who has heard that whisper has ever lived to tell about it. They are all claimed. The skin taker waits for no one. The curse of the skin taker goes far beyond the stories of his killings. He isn't just some monster who kills for the thrill or for food. He is something more, something older, something ancient. He is a spirit, vengeful and driven by a thirst for the living that cannot be quenched. The town has long since learned not to speak his name too loudly, for to do so is to invite disaster. But even in the silence, there's an undercurrent of truth, something that the old-timers know but can't quite explain. They all tell the same story. Once the skin taker has marked you, once you've heard his whisper in the wind, your fate is sealed. It is only a matter of time before he comes for you, claiming your skin as his own, just as he has done with so many others before. No one really knows when or how the skin taker was born, though the stories have been passed down for generations. Some say he was once a man, a hunter, a trapper, a wanderer who lived in the woods long before the town was founded. But he became something more, something darker. Some believe he made a pact with something ancient, something evil that resided deep in the forest in exchange for power that he could never escape. Others say the skin taker is a spirit, a soul twisted by vengeance, one that has been around for centuries, feeding off the fear and terror of those who enter his domain. Either way, his curse has never stopped. The most chilling part of the story is the belief that the skin taker isn't just a killer. He doesn't kill for food, nor does he kill for sport. He kills to collect. The skins of his victims, he is said to wear them, literally. Each piece of flesh, each scrap of skin is sewn together, stitched into a grotesque patchwork quilt that covers his twisted form. The skin taker, they say, isn't just seeking revenge. He is seeking something far more insidious. He is trying to become something other than the monster he is. He is seeking to hide behind the skins of the living, to shed his own identity and wear the identities of his victims. one by one. What is it that drives him to such madness? No one knows for sure, but some believe that he is a creature caught in a never-ending cycle. Every time he takes a life, every time he claims a new skin, he grows stronger. He becomes more powerful. And the curse that surrounds him only tightens its grip on the town. He is a predator, forever hunting for his next victim, and he is not bound by time or space. Some say that if you look into his eyes, if you stare long enough, you'll see the faces of all the people he's ever taken. Their eyes staring back at you in unblinking silence, their screams muffled behind the layers of skin that he wears like armor. The locals know that if you venture too deep into the woods, you'll find the skin taker's lair. It's hidden beneath the roots of the oldest tree in the forest, an ancient oak that seems to tower over everything else, its gnarled branches twisting into the sky like skeletal arms. The tree itself is a mystery. Its bark is dark and rough, and there is something about it that feels wrong, as if it's alive in a way that trees shouldn't be. Beneath this tree, hidden from the casual observer, lies a dark cave, its entrance concealed by vines and thick underbrush. But if you know where to look, if you dare to seek it out, you'll find the way inside. Inside the cave, the true horror of the skin taker is revealed. The walls are lined with human skin, some old and decayed, others fresh, still glistening with the faint remnants of blood. The skins are nailed to the walls, arranged in haphazard patterns, but the pieces of flesh are unmistakable. There are hands, faces, limbs, all crudely stitched together, creating a tapestry of death that stretches across the cave. In the center of the cave, there is a throne made of bone and discarded skin, where the skin taker waits. His presence is palpable, as if the very air in the cave is thick with the weight of his power. The face of the skin taker is the most terrifying of all. His true face is hidden beneath the layers of human skin that he has taken over the years. No one who has seen him has lived to tell the tale. But there are accounts from those who claim to have glimpsed him from a distance. Some say his face is a patchwork of the faces of his victims, their features twisted and distorted, barely recognizable as human. His eyes are black, empty pits that seem to stare straight into your soul, and his mouth is a twisted, cruel grin that stretches impossibly wide. His skin, if it can even be called that, is a sickening blend of pale and mottled patches, stitched together in a crude attempt to form a semblance of humanity. The skin taker is a grotesque abomination of a creature, a soul long lost to darkness, driven only by a need for more, for the next skin, the next victim. The curse of the skin taker is more than just a fear. It is an inescapable truth that binds the people of this town. Once you hear the whisper in the wind, once you feel the cold air on your neck, you are marked. The skin taker will come for you. It is only a matter of time before you are claimed, before your skin is torn from your body and added to his grotesque collection. Some say that the skin taker's hunger is endless, that he will never stop hunting, that no matter how many skins he takes, no matter how many lives he destroys, he will never be satisfied. And once he claims your skin, once you are part of his patchwork body, you are lost forever. There is no escape, no salvation, only the endless hunt. And so the curse continues, passed from one generation to the next. The skin taker is always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next victim. His legend grows with every passing year, and the people who still live in the town know the truth. They are trapped. The skin taker is real, and no one who has heard the whisper of his name has ever escaped his reach. What happens if you go looking for the skin taker? What happens if, despite all the warnings, despite all the horrific stories passed down through generations, you decide to venture into the woods? What happens when you stand on the edge of the forest, heart pounding, and take that first step into the darkness? Will you return like the others before you? Or will you become yet another name whispered among the locals? Another tragic tale that people speak of in hushed tones over their dinner tables or late-night drinks. Another ghost story to frighten children with. Will you return with your sanity intact, or will you too be claimed by the skin taker? Your skin taken, your body left as a hollow shell. There is only one way to find out, and it's a path that many have taken before you, only to disappear forever, lost in the woods, never seen again. The truth is, no one really knows what happens to the people who go searching for him. Some return, but not as they once were. They return changed, haunted by what they've seen, driven mad by the horrors they've witnessed. Their eyes are vacant, their bodies emaciated, as though they've been drained of all vitality. Their voices tremble when they speak, as if the terror of the woods has taken its toll on their very souls. They are never the same. And then there are those who never return at all. The skin taker's victims. Those poor souls who crossed into his domain and were consumed by him. They are lost to the woods, their names forgotten, their lives erased from memory. Some say they've been taken into the depths of the forest, where they're forced to wander forever in the dark, lost to time and space. Others say they're trapped in a twisted afterlife, bound to the skin taker's curse. Their souls now part of his grotesque patchwork body. But one thing is certain. If you seek him, you will not leave the same as you came. If you're lucky enough to return at all, you will be forever marked by him. forever haunted by the whispers on the wind. But what is it that draws people to the skin taker? What is it that drives them to seek him out, even when they know the stories, even when they know the terrible price they will have to pay? Maybe it's the need to prove something to themselves or to others. Maybe it's the thrill of the unknown, the excitement of stepping into the darkness and testing fate. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the desperation to understand, to uncover the truth of the skin taker, to confront the thing that haunts the woods, to finally put an end to the terror that has plagued the town for so long. But in the end, it doesn't matter what drives you, because once the skin taker sets his sights on you, there's no escape. He doesn't just hunt for bodies. He hunts for souls. He feeds on fear, on the terror of those who cross into his domain. And once you are marked by him, once you feel his cold breath on the back of your neck, there is no turning back. You are his. You will never be free. The skin taker doesn't just kill. He doesn't just take lives. He consumes everything that you are. And when he's done, you are nothing more than a hollow shell, a trophy to add to his collection. So what happens when you hear the whispers on the wind? What happens when the air grows cold and the trees seem to bend in on you as if they're closing in, trapping you in their embrace? When you hear that soft, almost inaudible whisper, like a breath against your ear, do you stay? Do you listen? Or do you run as fast as you can, trying to escape the inevitable? If you hear the whispers, you better run, because the skin taker is coming for you. And when he comes, he won't stop. Not until you are his. Not until you are nothing more than another piece in his twisted collection. There is no mercy in the skin taker. There is no escape. Once he has chosen you, you belong to him, and he will follow you, hunt you, until there is nothing left but the hollow remnants of what you once were. The legend of the skin taker continues to haunt the woods of Kentucky, growing with each passing year, feeding off the fear of those who venture too close. It is a story that never ends, a nightmare that repeats itself over and over again. Every year, there are more disappearances. Every year, the whispers grow louder. And every year, the curse continues to claim its victims. If you enter the woods, you will not come back the same. Some will never come back at all. The skin taker will see to that. He is always watching, always waiting, his cold eyes fixed on anyone who dares to cross into his domain. And if you listen closely enough, you can hear him. You can hear him calling from the shadows, calling for you, waiting for you to step closer. So if you ever find yourself at the edge of those woods, if you ever feel the chill in the air and hear the whispers on the wind, remember this. Some stories are best left untold. Some things are best left undisturbed. The skin taker is real, and he is always waiting. And once you've heard the whispers, Once you felt the wind grow cold, there's no running from him. Because once he has set his sights on you, you are already his, and there is no escape from the skin taker.